people all around the world, and it doesn't matter if you work in a service sector or the tech sector, the financial, hospitality, nonprofit, people everywhere come to work desperately wanting to contribute and wanting to do work that matters and make an impact. I can't find people who want to slide, like get by with doing the minimum. People want to do the maximum, and it hurts them when they can't. And it leads to exhaustion and burnout. But when they can, work is like exhilarating and fun.
Well, hey, leader, and welcome to episode number 302 of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Baratung Advisors. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here, and I hope that you'll enjoy our content and become a subscriber. We are committed to bringing you new leadership content every single week of the year, and so make sure that you're subscribed so you get all of the new episodes. And to those who have been listening to the podcast for a while, thank you so much. And it would mean the world to me if you would leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to this podcast through. That really does help us grow our audience and reach more leaders, which is our whole mission here at L3 Leadership. And thank you to each of you who have already left a rating and review. I love reading these, and they really do fire me up. And I thought I'd start highlighting them now in each episode. And so I want to read just one of the reviews left by A Sobering, and they said this. They said, "Such a wealth of knowledge. This is one of the most insightful podcasts that I have ever come across. Doug does such a great job of sharing his wisdom, and I love how he leads meaningful conversations with guests who bring so much experience to the table. I highly recommend checking this show out. You will not be disappointed." So thank you so much, A Sobering, for leaving that rating and review. Well, in today's episode, you are in for a treat. We have a returning guest and my friend Liz Wiseman with us to talk about her new book called Impact Players, which is absolutely incredible. And in addition to having a conversation around the book, we also talk about how she's raised a great family while also having a great career. We talk about how her family takes adventures, really insightful. And of course, we take her through the lightning round because we didn't get an opportunity to do that in the first interview we had together. So you're going to love this interview. But if you're unfamiliar with Liz, let me just tell you a little bit about her. Liz is a researcher and an executive advisor who teaches leadership to executives around the world. She is author of the New York Times bestseller Multipliers: How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter, The Multiplier Effect: Tapping the Genius Inside Our Schools, and Wall Street Journal's bestseller Rookie Smarts: Why Learning Beats Knowledge in the New Game of Work. She is the CEO of the Wiseman Group, a leadership research and development firm headquartered in Silicon Valley in California. Some of her recent clients include Apple, AT&T, Disney, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Nike, Salesforce, Tesla, and Twitter. Wow. Liz has been listed on the Thinkers 50 ranking as named one of the top 10 leadership thinkers in the world. And she's conducted significant research in the field of leadership and collective intelligence and writes for Harvard Business Review, Fortune, and a variety of other business and leadership journals. She's a former executive at Oracle Corporation, where she worked over the course of 17 years as the vice president of Oracle University and as the global leader for human resource development. Now, how is that for a resume? And you have the opportunity in the next few minutes to learn from Liz and sit in our conversation, which you're going to absolutely love. But before we dive into the interview, just a few announcements. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Baratung Advisors. The financial advisors at Baratung Advisors help educate and empower clients to make informed financial decisions. You can find out how Baratung Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future by visiting their website at baratungadvisors.com. That's BERATUNG advisors.com. Securities and investment products and services offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Baratung Advisors, LPL Financial, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. I also want to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny. And my wife, Laura, and I got our engagement and wedding rings there, and we had an incredible experience. And not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, for every couple that gets engaged and comes into their store, they give them a book to help them prepare for marriage. And we just absolutely love that. So if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out hennyjewelers.com. And with all that being said, let's dive right in. Here's my conversation with Liz Wiseman. Well, hey, Liz, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. I'm really excited to have another conversation with you. And today we really want to focus on your new book, which is called Impact Players. And why don't we just start off with you just telling us, why did you write this book and what do you want people to get out of it?
Oh, goodness. Well, there's so many reasons why I wrote the book. Like maybe the most honest reason why I wrote the book is I was bored. I needed something to do. And it is like if I'm not researching and writing a book, like I have this frenetic need to build something and make something creative. So I'm either going to go redecorate my house or do something useless or channel my energy to something more productive. So I like having a question that I can lock onto. And, this was a question that was probably a dozen years in the making because I've been out teaching leadership and teaching leaders how to be multipliers and how to use all of the intelligence on their team and how do you create a high contribution, high intelligence, high impact team. And I have been so focused on the leaders. And it was kind of a combination of a snarky comment someone made and what I call warranty calls that got me down this path. The warranty calls are when I hear from leaders like, hey, I read your book, I heard you speak, I went to a workshop, blah, blah, blah. I tried it, it didn't work for me. And so we go to work on that. Like, well, what's going on? And I usually start with, well, maybe these ideas and these principles behind being a multiplier leader don't work. But then we start to dig into like, why might not this be working for you? And, sometimes it's the way that the leaders are going about things, but sometimes it's the dynamic that's been created on their team. And like what happens when people are historically diminished. When they've been told, don't touch that, don't speak up, don't take that on, do what I tell you, like people start to lose the will to contribute and to play big. And it's such a deep need people have. But like, I started to look at, well, what's beyond the leader's realm? And what is the responsibility of the contributor? And the snarky comment that got me, really down this path was I was out there teaching multipliers. And I love working with leaders and teaching and, kind of trying to help people be better leaders. And this one guy, an engineering manager, I think it was at Salesforce, raises his hand. He's like, okay, yeah, I get it. I want to be a multiplier. Got it. But you can't multiply zero. I'm like, what does that mean? And because I'm interpreting his comment as, well, I got a bunch of zeros working for me. And I'm about to launch into like my speech about like a speech within a speech. And I was about to launch into like, hey, dude, everyone has intelligence and you're just not seeing it. And your job as a leader is to see that intelligence and tap into it. Yeah. And like, not everyone's a genius, but everyone has some form of genius. And like, your people aren't zeros. And I realized he's talking about something totally different. When I calm down from my speech is he's saying, yeah, as a leader, I need to have the right kind of practices and mindsets, but so do the people on my team. Like they got to give me something to work with, not in terms of capability or intelligence, but mindset and attitude, and so if, you want to build an organization where people are contributing at their fullest and making an impact, leadership matters. Absolutely. But so does contributorship. And it's a subject that's less explored. When I was, I'm pulling out the book here because I'm looking for the wording of one of the endorsements. It was Amy Edmondson, a Harvard professor I really respect. Here's what she says. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Impact Coach is a good book. She says, in a refreshing departure from the relentless emphasis on leadership that dominates the field, Wiseman digs into the important question of how people make themselves valuable and how they find ways to make an impact where it matters most. It's like everyone wants to put the focus on the leaders, but very few people have explored what does the art of contributorship look like in today's world where, we're dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity and the kinds of issues leaders used to like settle for people. Like, oh, don't worry, your pretty little head. I'll set the vision. You just execute. Like, you know what? Don't worry. Daddy's got this figured out. Mommy's going to take care of this. You just do your job. Well, that world doesn't exist anymore. And so what does showing up and contributing at our best look like for kind of the moment we're in right now? So that's probably long-winded, but that's what got me down this path.
Yeah. And in the book, you talk about, 5 things that really separate contributors from what you call impact players. And I just want to kind of dive deep into each of those. And the first one, you said, while others do their jobs, impact players figure out what the real job to be done is. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, what struck me, so the essence of the research is I went to talk to 170 managers and asked them to identify someone who was smart, hardworking, and capable, who was doing a fine job. A rock solid contributor on their team versus someone who was smart, hardworking, capable, but was making an enormous impact. And I wanted to know what that difference was. And what struck me is how managers described those rock solid contributors. They're like, man, Mark, he does his job. He's brilliant at his job. He does his job well. But these weren't the impact players on the team. And the impact players on the team, it's not like they didn't do their job, but they had a different orientation to their job, which is my job isn't this artificial construct called the job description. Like my job is to solve problems in a certain realm. And so my job is to figure out the job and then go and do it. So while others are doing their job, others are doing the job that needs to be done, which is usually involves swimming outside your lane. It's probably more like water polo than a swim meet.
Yeah. And I don't know if I heard this in an interview or read it in the book, but you made this statement I just love. You said, contributors and impact players need to say, I need to make myself useful, not important. And we live in a world where everybody wants to be viewed as important, whether that's on Instagram or in the workplace. Can you talk more about that statement? Because I think that is needed so desperately in our culture today.
Well, boy, this is some advice I got early on in my career. And it was from a man named Bob Shaver who never said this, but it was what I interpreted from what he said. So I was when I was at Oracle, and there was a job I wanted and a role I wanted, and I wanted to teach leadership. Big surprise. I don't know, must have come out of the womb wanting to do this, but I'd come out of grad school and this is what I wanted to do. And I was first of all, I tried to get a job working for a leadership training company. I'm like, hey, hire me. I'm passionate about this. And they're like, hey, you seem great, but maybe you should go get some management experience before trying to teach people how to manage. I'm like, oh man, you don't get me. You don't get what I'm passionate about. Ed Musselwhite, who was the president of this company, he and I still have a good laugh over this. They issued me a job offer a couple of years ago, and they're like, will you please come and work for us? Smiley face, And they said, we apologize for not hiring you. But I was like gunning to go do this thing I was passionate about. And, I'm a year into my employment at Oracle, and there's this opening for a job in the training department, and the group does technical training. But I'm like, ooh, I bet their charter is going to expand as the company's expanding, and they're going to become like a more full service training group, and they're going to do management training. Like, I'll go work there. And so I'm interviewing with the VP, and kind of towards the end of the interview, I tell him what I think I can do to help Oracle. And I'm like, Oracle's putting a lot of young, inexperienced technologists into management, and they're kind of wreaking havoc on the group. And Oracle needs a management training program, like a management boot camp, and put me in, coach. I would love to do this. And Bob says to me, like, that's great, Liz. We think you're great. We're so excited to have you join this group, but your boss has a different problem. She's got to figure out how to get 2,000 new college graduates up to speed in Oracle technology. And what would be terrific, young Liz Wiseman, is for you to help her solve that problem. He was very polite about it. But what I could hear in his words was, Liz, that's not what's important. Here's what's important. And how about you go make yourself useful? Like, go be useful. And it's not the job I wanted at all. I wanted to teach leadership, and he wants me to go like teach programming to a bunch of nerd programmers. And that's not my jam. That's not me. And so this to me like deeply anchored this idea, which is get over yourself and go serve where you're needed. and find out what's important and go work on what's important. And strangely, when you do that, you become really important. There's at one point, one of my colleagues at Oracle asked for my advice. She said, "Hey, Liz, can we have lunch?" I'm like, sure. She goes, "I need some help. I need some help getting," because I got promotion after promotion after promotion after I went and took that job and did the thing that was important. And she wanted to talk. She's like, "Oh, I have this important new initiative that I want to introduce to the executives. I want their buy-in. It's a large corporation. She needs executive support." And she's like, "Can you help me do that?" I'm like, She describes what she wants. I'm like, "I don't know that I can help you do that." And she's like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Your whole anatomy, girl. Like, what is going on?" She bought me lunch too. And I'm like, "I don't know how to do that." Because she needed to take this program and get them all jazzed about it, get them to like sponsor it across the organization. I'm like, "I've never done that." She said, "What do you mean you've never done that?" I'm like, "I've never taken anything that was important to me and made it important to the executives." I said, "What I do is I find out what's important to them and to the organization, and then I make that important to me. And then I make that happen." And I said, yeah, by doing that over and over, I've probably earned a lot of influence. And yes, I've probably earned the right to take something that I thought was really important and say, "Hey, guys, like, heads up, we need to deal with this." Or to say, "I want to do this." And they're like, "Yeah, great. Here's a blank check."
Wow.
But it doesn't start that way. It starts by wrapping yourself and serving where you're needed. And I'm like, I can help you understand what's important to them and position what you're doing in a way that they care about. Like, I can help you with that, but I can't make them care about something that's not the agenda for the company.
That's interesting. And so, for a generation who only wants to do what they're passionate about, and that's all the advice they're given is, live your passion. What I basically have heard you say that the path to actually living out your passion and doing things you're passionate about is to make the passion of others your passion for as long as that takes. And eventually you'll build the credibility needed within the organization or in the world to do what you're passionate about, which is what I see, you get to live out, it seems like, every day of your life now. I am curious, just on your journey side, do you think, I know your boss has said, "Hey, I want to teach leadership." And they're like, "Hey, it might be a good idea for you to, to actually manage people before you do that." Even with the work you're doing today, do you think you could be doing what you're doing today and even some of what you did through the influence you earned had you not taken that journey?
No. Yes, I can do it. And lots of people do, but I don't think they do it well. Like, I can tell when people are out teaching leadership who haven't had a real leadership job, who are doing what I tried to do. It's absolutely what I wanted to do, which is I want to go straight to dessert. But you see the difference. Like, I think what's different because I took that path. Now, Doug, I did not take this path nobly. It's not like I'm like, "No, I refuse your job offer because I must go and serve in hard leadership roles before I can." No. I was rejected. Like, I didn't get the job. I would have taken it had they offered it. And I spent the next 17 years toiling in difficult jobs. Now, I don't want to make it sound like you have to somehow pay your dues for 17 years. I was loving every minute of this. But in the work I do teaching and as a coach to executives, I think I do it differently because I understand the pain.
Yeah.
I understand dilemmas and trade-offs. I'm like, I'm not going to give you sunshine and Sunday school kinds of like easy answers. "Oh, well, just do this." When you had to like let go of 100 people on one day and end people's jobs, you just think about things differently. You understand this like tension that people feel. And I think I approached the job with empathy. And having failed and having learned through my own failures and having caused pain for other people, you see that, wow, leadership really matters. It's not a theoretical topic. So yeah, I was glad I was given this guidance. And I don't want to create the impression that somehow you have to go fake like you care about something you don't care about. Yeah, use your passion to decide where you work, who you work, to start a company, to pick a path in life, a career. But once you join a team, like you don't want to be the one who's like passionately sprinting in the wrong direction, because your teammates will see you as a fool. And they'll actually see you as a liability, not as an asset to the team. Yeah, like that's the guy who scores the own goal.
So would you say becoming an impact player is the path to leadership? I know you've done a lot on leadership, but is that the path to getting noticed and becoming the obvious choice for promotion? Or are there some people that are just impact players and they're better in an individual contributor role being an impact player? I'm just curious, did you learn anything along the way about that?
Well, there are people who are just good at what they do, whatever they do, like, who are going to be impact players on the team, and then they get promoted into management and they're going to figure out how to be brilliant managers for certain. Here's the dilemma, or it's the tension, is that when you work like an impact player, and I know you were probably trying to take us through all 5 and I got super detailed, but like, instead of just doing your job, you do the job that needs to be done. These are people who don't wait to be invited to lead. They just step up and lead, but they also step back and follow others. They, when things get hard, they don't escalate issues. They hold on to ownership and get things done, all the way done. They're like completion freaks. They're people who when times are changing, they're asking, how can I change? How can I be different, rather than stalwart? And, there are people who, when, workloads are really heavy, there are people who don't add to the burden. There are people who make work light for everyone, not because they take their work like, oh, gee, Doug, you seem busy. I'll do your job and mine and hers and his. They're people who are just easy to work with. They make work easy. They're light. They're lighthearted. Well, you add that whole package together, and these are people who get handed a lot of responsibility. Like, these are people who play offense and defense. These are people who get trusted in the most critical moments. And so they are naturals for leadership roles. And sometimes that role looks like a management job in a hierarchy of some sort. Sometimes it just looks like influencers, people who are influential inside organizations or influential in the world. So yes, it greases the path to management and leadership. However, there are parts of this impact player mindset and sort of practice set that make for amazing leaders. And then there are some of that anatomy that is a real handicap going into that, like someone who gets the job done all the way done, can lead you down the path of heroics rather than helping others get it done. I mean, your job as a leader is to make good things happen. But if you're the one who's doing all the good things, you're going to have a diminishing effect on others. So it takes some reorientation. Like, there's parts of it where, like, okay, that's going to be very extensible into great leadership. That is probably going to give you some problems, and cause grief for other people. So how do we tweak that?
And this is more on the leadership side, but I do want to hear you talk about this, because I heard you say this in an interview. You said that you had a boss that basically came in and said, Liz, you can sit in your office all day and read novels all day as much as I care, as long as the team is getting the work done.
I thought he was a wacko, Doug. I thought he was a total wacko. Well, he was a little bit of a wacko. It was my first management job. And I think I had been on this impact player path for certain. If someone handed me the ball, it was going to get across the finish line, and I was going to run the right direction generally. And so here I am leading, and I'm like, busy. And my boss comes in and just sits down abruptly and just says, hey, Liz, just wanted you to know that if you want to sit in your office all day and read novels, that's fine with me. And I'm like, what? A weirdo. What a weirdo. I'm not going to sit in here and read novels. I think so. I don't know that I've shared this with many people, but I was fired from my first job, for my first teenage job. Now, I worked for my dad in his donut shop when I was 13, but I got a job in the mall it was called T-Shirts Plus. And remember, well, Doug, I think you're too young for this, but it was back when one of these stores where you buy a T-shirt and then you pick a decal and then you iron it onto the shirt.
Okay.
They didn't exist.
I might have missed that, but yes, I know what you're talking about.
You didn't miss much, but it was one of these stores. And I was fired from my job because I wasn't serious about my job. I was always asking for days off. My friends would come into the T-shirt store and I would like chat with them. And I think it put like a work ethic in me. Like, oh, I'm never going to be like lazy, asleep at the wheel, cavalier about my responsibilities. And so I had this overdeveloped sense of work ethic and contribution and carry your weight. And so like the idea of reading novels, who would do that? And it took me a few days to figure out what he was saying to me. I can't believe it took me a few days to figure this out because everyone listening would have figured it out right away. But I'm like, oh, what he's saying is my personal productivity doesn't matter. And in some ways, if I focus on my personal impact, I'm going to sell the team short. Like my job as a leader is to ensure that good things are happening. And my job is to get other people contributing and working and making an impact. And my impact is the sum of that. And so, yeah, if I can do that and sit and read novels, like focusing on the contribution of the people who work for you is way more important. And it sounds so silly saying it now because it's obvious, but I guess it wasn't obvious to me then.
So did you ever actually read novels in your office?
No, I mean, I don't even read novels like in my spare time. Like you should see what my friends have to do to get me to read a novel is, well, if it's like, I don't know, old literature, I do read a fair bit of that, but like current novels, I'm like, no, I'm a nonfiction kind of gal. I'm a researcher, but yeah, no, I'm not a.
Yeah. So Liz, talk about how can people utilize the book? I know you created a quiz, but for someone listening to this, if they're a contributor, obviously this can teach them how to be an impact player. And how can leaders use the book? I think about that guy that said you can't multiply zero. How can you start to get these traits in front of your team? Obviously they have skills, but so they can become impact players.
I think there are a couple ways you can use the book. I mean, the book kind of lays out, here's what makes impact players different. And then it recommends a set of plays, like here are practical things you can do to increase your impact and influence and value. So you can read the book. At the end of every chapter, there's a playbook. So you can read it for here's what I can do to be more of an impact player. And, like my other books, it kind of assumes that you could be starting from any place and you could always get better at these things. Then you can read the book as a leader. And the second half of the book is really geared towards how do you build a high impact team and what can leaders do? And there's a playbook for coaches as well. Here's how you can help others increase their impact. And here's how you can build an entire team of people who think and act this way. Mm-hmm. And there's a playbook there. It can be used to maybe as a bit of a self-assessment, which is, have I slipped into contributor mindset where I'm just like going through the motions, I'm doing my job, or am I really, am I a position holder right now, or am I a difference maker?
Wow. And I know you have the assessment on the website as well. So I took that and I am over eager is what my assessment came out. So help me, Liz.
Of course you are.
Help me overcome my over eagerness.
Oh, so there's a bunch of ways that we end up getting in our way, like reducing, diluting our impact. For some, it's they're working too hard. Like you got your head down. You are so busy, like doing your job. You don't see what's really happening around you and where you can really be of most value. Another way people end up reducing their impact is that they're playing by the rules. Like, oh no, I can't take over this meeting. No one told me I was the leader. and they need to be a little bit more like disruptive, a little bit more like, oh yeah, no one appointed me the boss, but we need a boss. So therefore I will be the boss for today. Like I will take, this sort of take charge chutzpah kind of thing. Some people are playing it too safe, like, ooh, scary. And they need to just sort of run toward the ambiguity. And then there are people who are maybe a little bit too eager, meaning they're trying too hard, like, I'm passionate and I want to use my passion. I'm all into improvement and self-improvement. Help me be better. And what they can, and I'm not saying this is you, Doug, but
I bet you it is.
they end up just a little bit annoying to everyone else, which is like, hey, coach, put me in. Hey, I want to be helpful. Like, give me something to do. Hey, tell me how I can be better. How am I doing? Tell me, and they're just over efforting their contribution. And it might be that they just need to shift their focus towards how they can be valuable as opposed to how they can be good.
That's good.
It's overeager. That was me, like, hey, I want to build this. I want to do that. Look what I can do for the company. And he's like, calm down, Liz, and go help your boss solve a problem.
Yeah, I'll share this little snippet with our team and see what kind of feedback I get if I'm overeager, which I'm sure they'll be in total agreement. Anything else on the book? Where can people find it before we dive into the lightning round, some personal questions?
Well, you can find the book in the various places: Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Porchlight, bookstores. Someone told me it's in France, so that's a big victory.
Nice.
Because, these kinds of books don't tend to do well in certain countries. If you want information about the book, you can go to impactplayersbook.com.
Yeah. And take the assessment. We'll include links to all of that in the show notes. And I think I sent you a picture before, but I love Barnes and Nobles, and I love going there and just seeing books. And I think I saw a stack of your multiplier book one day and I got so fired up. So I always get excited when I see other people's books. So make sure, leaders, if you're listening to this, go buy a book, buy a copy for your team, and it'll add a ton of value. So thank you, Liz.
Yeah.
I want to take you through the lightning round because we didn't get to last time. But before we do, when we first connected, we became friends on social media, and it's just been fun following your journey. I have a lot of admiration for the way you live your life and the way you lead your family and the way your family lives. So I did want to ask a few selfish questions personally. What advice, I have 3 little ones. We were talking about this before we jumped on. What advice would you give, families raising young kids to raise an awesome family?
It's kind of the grandma perspective is just love them. Just love them and be patient. I'm not a patient person by nature. And it's not lightly around worthy, but I can tell you stories of times where I have wanted to go in and fix a problem, correct them, coach them, get them to be good little people. And for me, I think it's the spirit that whispers, just let it go, hold back. And they've usually been moments where, moments of great tenderness and vulnerability. And so I figure if I've done anything right raising my kids, I think my kids know that I love them no matter what, even
That's
in
really
their
good.
little monster state.
And you've also had a very busy career and a successful career as well. And I know your husband works too. Any advice, where both parents are working to still be able to do that? Were there any boundaries that you set when it came to work, or things that you prioritized as a family as far as time away, just to make sure that you do love them well?
I've had a bit of a mantra, and our daughter, Megan, her middle name is McKay, and she is named for, that middle name comes from David O. McKay, who was a spiritual leader. He's in the 60s. And he had said something that has always stayed with me. He said, no success can compensate for failure in the home. And for me, it's been a bit of a mantra. And it's not to say that you can't have success outside the home and have a successful family. But in the end, no material success, no commercial success, no worldly success is going to feel good enough to make up for having failed in your core responsibility in your home, whether that's as a parent, as a son, a daughter, a sibling. And so to me, that says you can do a bunch of things, but you got to know what's number one. And in the end of the day, my family's number one. And I think I've actually ended up having a fair bit of success at work because I'm like, yeah, I love my work. And I've told this to executives. I remember telling it to the president of Oracle once. I love my job, but I don't love my job more than I love my kids.
Mm-hmm. Any advice on, you guys take a lot of great adventures, it seems. I know you have one son in particular who's the craziest adventurer I've ever seen in my life. Any advice on, creating meaningful experiences, trips, vacations?
Yeah, we do a lot of vacationing together, whether it's backpacking in the mountains or going to different countries. But the little rule that we followed is just don't go to the same place twice. Like some families have a place they go to, a cabin or a favorite beach that they like to go back to year after year. And that creates a whole wonderful dynamic. For us, we've been on the path of adventure, like taking our kids out into the world. And so every summer we go to a different country, most often in the developing world. And so it's like this sense of like, we're going to explore the world together. Mm-hmm. And they've been just great experiences.
Oh, that's cool. I know part of the argument for going to the same place every year, or at least having a place, is because for me, I'm the same way. I want to go somewhere different every single time, but then I never rest. Because for me, I'm over eager and I want to do absolutely everything. I'm like, I have to hit every bucket list item, try the best restaurants. I'm just curious, do you guys have a place where you do unwind, or are you able to do that on the adventures you take?
No, we don't unwind. We unwind at home. Like our vacations are adventures, not vacations.
I like that.
Yeah. And we also, part of our, I guess, philosophy as a family has been to not own much. So we don't own second houses, cabins, boats, wrecked vehicles, doom buggies. Like we just, maybe it's because my dad and mom owned a boat when we were growing up, and boy, that's a nightmare. And we just don't own anything because like it creates a heaviness, an obligation, debt. And so we just said, you know what, if we want to go to a cabin somewhere, we're going to rent a cabin, but just not to own many material possessions. And I don't know, it creates a lightness.
Yeah, no, I think that's incredible advice for everything I just asked. And then lastly, as I've watched you, you make a significant difference with your life too. It seems like you give back a lot personally. You mentor a lot of people. Any advice for leaders when it comes to making a difference beyond, being a crazy busy mom and an executive and leadership coach?
Well, I don't know. I think it's about striping. I had this like misguided sense early in my life that I'm like, okay, let's say I live to 90. I'm going to spend we had our first daughter when I was 30. And I guess late on some people's time schedules, early on others. But I'm like, oh yeah, the first 30 years of my life were really about me, my education, my career, my marriage, my husband and I, where we wanted to go. And then I said, oh yeah, I'll probably spend the next 30 years of my life really focused on my family. Work will become a secondary priority. Family will become, and it'll take about 30 years to get those kids raised and out the door. It turns out it was like 27 end to end. So I was almost right with that 30. And then the following 30, 60 to 90 will be about the community and giving back. And I thought I would just stripe my life this way, but it turns out that those opportunities to do something of use in the community came earlier than that. And I wasn't able to segment it, but at least I could say, okay, a stripe of my time is for my family. A stripe of my time is for me and my job. And a stripe of my time is for the community. And I can balance it that way. And some of that was hard when I was working with young children and I couldn't do as much as I wanted, but the work that I was able to do in the community, I would want my children to see that. I just had an experience in September where there was an opportunity to go and do some work with Congress and testify in Congress on some really important leadership issues. I didn't have time for it. I was in the middle of a book launch. I'm like, this is why I do the work I do. And so I'm going to suck it up and make that happen. But it's a balance.
Yeah. Well, thank you for living that balance out. So now it's time for the lightning round. Just a bunch of fun questions I like to run everyone through. The first one is, what is the best advice you've ever received and who gave it to you?
Oh, I'm going to go back to like Bob Shaver, who essentially said in so many words, hey, Liz, make yourself useful.
If you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Oh, I do think about this. I would probably put like, you have more power than you think you have. In almost any situation, we underestimate how much power we have.
Best purchase you've made in the last year for $100 or less. This stumps everyone.
Anything that I bought that I love might be like our new pizza oven. That was over $100. But I'll tell you what, I just bought something recently that made me so happy. I think it was like 20 something bucks. A pad of paper.
Yes.
I haven't had a pad of paper for years. I'm always like post-it notes and scribbling. And I'm like, I need something to write things down on other than my phone, my laptop. I am so happy with a pad of paper. Paper makes me happy. Sharpie markers and a pad of paper, I'm good.
All right. Well, hey, for those listening, we will include a link in the show notes for all of you to get Sharpie markers and pads of paper. It'll be awesome. Are there 2 or 3 books that had such a significant impact on your life that you find yourself giving away most often or recommending them?
Well, I think the book that has had a lot of impact on me professionally was the book Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath brothers. And that has really helped me to sharpen my thinking and communications. And boy, I have so many favorite books. They're like my kids. I don't know. I don't have one book that has become like a Bible kind of status in my life. I'm far more eclectic. Like I try to take a little bit from everything I read.
Same question. Do you listen to podcasts? And if you do you have 2 or 3 favorites?
Doug, I am such a boring person. That's like this lightning round, boring. I like a pad of paper, sharper marker. I listen to like the New York Times Daily podcast. I listen to very newsy. I feel like to do my job well, I just need to understand what's going on in the world.
What do you wish people knew about your journey that they may not know?
I think a lot of people look at the work I do and think, oh, it's exciting and it's glamorous and it's around the world and speaking and teaching. Most of my work is done in solitude and it's lonely, quiet work.
You write a lot. I'm just curious, do you have any unique habits when it comes to writing that have enabled you to write the books you have?
Well, I have a unique writing habit that is helpful to me. And it was fun. My son is a freshman in college, my youngest, and he was taking a writing class. He's like, Mom, tell me again about the fishbone thing you do. So when I write, I'm not a great writer, so I have to like really work at it. And so I create a structure and an outline, and I call it fishbones. That like I put my outline in, and then every paragraph has like above it, like this is the point of the paragraph, and I put it in brackets like this, everything. And I write, and all that fishbones stay in, and I leave it in until the very last round of editing. And then I take it out, and I do it because it keeps me like in a logic flow. And when I go back and have to pick something up, I don't have to read like, what was I saying here? I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what I'm trying to say. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know if I invented it, but I just do this to help keep my thinking really structured.
Wow. I like that. You get to spend time with a ton of leaders and you ask a ton of questions with your life. I'm just curious, do you have a go-to question that you always ask, even if you're just having lunch or dinner, not researching for a book?
Oh, no, I don't have like a general curiosity question, but I tend, when I'm talking with senior executives, I spend a lot of time just trying to understand what's important. What's the agenda? What are you trying to accomplish? And like, what are you trying to accomplish that's not happening? And I spend a lot of time trying to understand what's someone's intent. And I'm annoying this way. Like if someone starts a meeting with me and they just jump in, I'm always like, what are we trying to accomplish here? What are we trying to do? What is the purpose here? So I like need to know what's the why, what's the context.
What's your greatest leadership pet peeve?
Tell me what you mean by pet peeve, Doug.
Thing that annoys you the most. You said you have a ton?
Pet peeves, like, yeah, things that kind of.
Just anything that annoys you about leaders, whether it's mistreating someone, Things that leaders do consistently on a consistent basis that you're just like, I can't believe they do that. This drives me nuts.
Oh my goodness, I've written whole books on this. I can't call it a pet peeve, but it bothers me when leaders don't see their hypocrisy. This is a larger subject, but I think all leaders are hypocrites. There's hypocrisy built into the job. Your job is to help people move to a better place, a different place, which means you straddle between like a fantastical destination and current reality. And in straddling that, you're going to aspire to things that you don't do yourself. And that's part of the job. And like when leaders can't see that, I think a lot of bad things happen. That doesn't qualify as a pet peeve.
No, I think you're good. I am curious, I know we don't have much time left, but how do leaders become self-aware around that? And how can they start to see their own hypocrisy?
It's seeing the things they do that are damaging with the best of intentions. And, my very favorite leadership student in the whole world is John Maxwell, who, when I shared with him, he invited me to come speak to his top clients. And we talked about the idea of the accidental diminisher. Doug, have you ever heard John tell this story?
About the accident? No, I don't think so.
So I know you're familiar with John and his
huge fan.
So he invites me to come speak about multipliers. I'm talking about diminishing leaders. And he's like, oh, that's not me. And then I'm talking about multiplier leaders. And John's like, oh yeah, I do that. I'm a multiplier. Absolutely. Check. And then I start talking about the accidental diminisher, the way we end up diminishing others with the best of intentions. Like we care about people. And so we rescue them when we're struggling. We build capability, they don't. Or, we're so optimistic and we see hopeful possibilities, but we don't see other people struggle. And John's like, his eyes are like an emoji, and he's just like, what? That's me. And so John then makes that his personal growth objective for the whole year. And he calls his team together and he's like, whoa, I'm an accidental diminisher. Like just in loving y'all up, I have become a diminisher to this team. And he leaves his team alone for like 2 hours. And he's like, help me understand this. And he comes back and they're like, oh yeah, we got stuff for you, but go away. Like come back in another hour. We're still working on this. And just the sincerity with which John, and for anyone who's listening who doesn't know who John Maxwell is, he's like one of the most prolific leadership authors. He's an amazing leader and just an amazing mentor and guide to so many people. But to see him for a year continue to introspect on his own hypocrisy and, how his intentions go awry, like was just so inspiring to me. And I love John, but who doesn't love John?
He's the best of the best. Yeah, that's awesome.
That wasn't lightning round. I'm sorry.
No, I asked you to dive into it. So thank you for doing that. If you could go back and give your 20-year-old self advice, what would you tell her?
I wouldn't tell her anything because like my 20-year-old self had it all figured out. And I don't mean in like, oh, I had all the answers. Is that in some ways I wish my 20-year-old self could give advice to my 57-year-old self, because I think that's better advice. Like, don't overthink it. Don't worry. Don't over rotate. Don't, just be, have fun.
Anything else you want to leave leaders with today?
I will leave this group of leaders with here's the number one thing I've learned from studying great leaders is that it's so easy for a leader to end up shutting down people's contribution. I write about that in Multipliers. And what I've learned, though, is that people all around the world, and it doesn't matter if you work in a service sector or the tech sector, the financial, hospitality, nonprofit, people everywhere come to work desperately wanting to contribute and wanting to do work that matters and make an impact. Like I can't find people who want to slide, who want to get by with doing the minimum. Like people want to do the maximum and it hurts them when they can't. And it leads to exhaustion and burnout. But when they can, work is exhilarating and fun. And so I see so many leaders who are like, oh man, my people are minimalists. No, they're not. You've created an environment that has caused them to hold back. Like, people want to make an impact.
Wow. So good. Well, Liz, it's an honor to have you back on the podcast again. This was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your work. And even more importantly, thank you for who you are. It's an honor and a joy to watch you from a distance. And I'm always inspired by you, and certainly from a family perspective as well. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thank you for seeing the good in me, and overlooking all of my foibles and flaws and finding something good in there. So thank you.
All right. Until next time, have a great day. Well, hey, leader, thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Liz Wiseman. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. You can find ways to connect with her and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes at l3leadership.org/302. And as always, leader, I want to challenge you that if you want to 10x your growth this year, then you really do need to either launch or join an L3 Leadership Mastermind Group. Mastermind groups have been the greatest source of growth in my life over the last 7 years. And if you're unfamiliar with what they are, they're just simply groups of 6 to 12 leaders that meet together for at least 1 year in order to help each other grow, achieve their goals, hold each other accountable, and to do life together. Leader, you need this in your life. If you're interested in learning more about masterminds, go to l3leadership.org/masterminds. And as always, I like to end every episode with a quote, and I will repeat a quote that Liz shared in the interview because I just thought it was so powerful. And I don't remember who she attributed it to, but she said this. She said, "No success can compensate for failure in the home." Let's remember that, leaders. Hey, I hope you were encouraged by this episode. Know that Laura and I love you. We believe in you. Keep leading. Don't quit. The world needs your leadership.